Thank you, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm one of those people who stuck their hand up when asked if we'd been working in the sector for over 30 years. That's me. I spent 1 year making a mistake when I left formal education, and ever since then I've been in social and affordable housing in England, Scotland, and the last 6 years in Australia. And I've probably had the privilege of doing just about every single job there is possible to do in housing, but I have never worked for the Aboriginal Housing Office nor for an Aboriginal community housing provider. And I think that is one of the really welcome things since coming to Australia, is that I found that as you get older, if you don't continue to learn, the brain seizes up, those synapses fry. So it's actually been fantastic that I've had the opportunity to work with so many great people. And for those of you who don't know, the New South Wales Federation of Housing Associations has got the privilege to work with a group of Aboriginal providers who are working towards setting up a separate Aboriginal housing peak organisation. And I think, oh no, she stood at the back of the room there. Suzanne Naden is the chair of our advisory committee, and it's really great for us to be able to do that. We've also got one of our members of staff who has disappeared, I think, hasn't she? Adele Hislop, who works with that committee, and she has been one of my great teachers along this journey I've been on, along with a non-Aboriginal woman, Viv Milligan, a lot of you know. Now, I have mislaid this zapper that is going to change my slides, so I'll have to... So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pose a few challenges. And what I should say about growth is it doesn't matter what sector you're in, there are always challenges. The Aboriginal sector will have some, but I'm going to talk about a lot that I could say mainstream community housing providers are challenged by too. And I think one of my colleagues down there, Rebecca, would probably agree that it's not easy growing social and affordable housing in any sector. The first thing I want to talk about is a strategic approach. As I grow older, I value my university degree more. I did it because I enjoyed the subject. It was geography. But what geography has taught me, and I realise it's taught me a lot more than I thought at the time when I was just enjoying myself back at university, is the connections that there are between things. There's often a desire amongst us to break things apart and analyse and not put them back together again. I'm one of these people that doesn't do detail too well. I like this big picture, this strategy thing. And I think one of the things that we're missing that makes it challenging for any sector to grow are long-term strategies that say, this isn't easy, it's going to take a long time, we're not going to be there in 6 months or 12 months. This may be a 10-year job. I may not see the end of it, but it's really important to actually be realistic about what it's going to take to achieve, because there's only disappointment otherwise. We try something, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. So let us have an Aboriginal housing strategy nationally and at the state level. And I think a great thing I've learned over the last 3 months is that's what the AHA wants to do. It's engaging with us about a long-term Aboriginal housing strategy. The other thing is that we sometimes pussyfoot around the fact that these things take a lot of dollars, don't they? There is no way that you can have subsidised housing without investment for government. It just doesn't work. We can be as innovative as we all want to be, and we do have an obligation to make sure that we spend money well and that we create efficiencies where we can. But push comes to shove, without the dollars there, this ain't going to work. We have to be realistic. That's why it's going to be a long term, but we need to be blunt about that. And one of the questions I pose is there sufficient dollar in the Aboriginal housing sector? Do you have a sufficient voice? Shane challenged us a bit on that to begin with. tomorrow, the reason I can't be here for the second day is simply we've the opportunity as a peak body to get in front of the Australian Treasury in Brisbane to talk about the new National Housing and Homeless Agreement. And what it should contain. Now, I don't expect to come back from Brisbane on the plane with a bag full or a case full of dollars, but we have to make the case. And one of the things I'll be arguing is that wouldn't it be nice if that agreement actually had something particular about the Aboriginal housing sector and support for it? I'll certainly be arguing for that. Not a lot of time to prepare, only found out on Friday evening. But those are the important conversations that this sector has to be represented at. And really, should it be me? No, it shouldn't, should it? It should be one of you. It should be Suzanne or someone like that. And we need to get to the stage where it's you at that table and not me. The other thing I think, is that we've got to recognise and make sure that, and I'm putting in inverted commas, that mainstream initiatives are open to everyone. That's partly about registration, but it isn't just about registration. You could be registered in the national regulatory system, and whether or not those initiatives, as they're designed at the moment, will support your participation, I question. You've not been involved in the design. Many of the community housing providers would also say they've not been involved in the design of them as well. But that has to change. That doesn't mean that a sector dictates to government what it requires, but it should be part of that conversation because, hey, we are the good guys, aren't we? We're not out there to make loads of money out of government. We're there to provide good outcomes from the communities that we serve. So we know, you know, what that means. So being part of the process of designing these initiatives has to be something that happens in the future. And then your sectoral. We talked a bit about the fact that you're now going to have an Aboriginal peak organisation that can speak on your behalf, can advocate and represent, and not be constrained by having or being part of another department. That's not a criticism of the AHO. It's a great part of government to work with. I can say that with a smile on my face because it's true, and I have to work with lots of parts of government, and one of my favourite bits to work with. But it isn't the same as they do not have the same freedom. So you need to have that voice. You need to make that voice clear. Now, whenever I've been in the room with you, you definitely do. But to a certain extent, we're talking to the converted here. We'll need to go out and do the advocacy with people who hold more control over some of those bigger resources. And then there's some locational things. I don't think any Aboriginal housing strategy can be one size fits all, can it? I mean, apart from the remote areas, I think one of the challenges for me when I'm advocating for the sector is who's on my side in the Sydney region. We've got the district plans and inclusion rezoning. We've got the Western Sydney City Deal. We've got all of that land around Central Everleigh. We've got Waterloo. We've got the Bays Precinct. How many Aboriginal providers are there out there to work with at the moment? Now, that is a real challenge as well, and one the sector can help us to put right. I hesitate to go on to this next slide because Suzanne stood at the back and she's going to get a bit upset about the word capacity. We've had a bit of a discussion in the advisory group about whether it's capacity or capability. But I'm afraid, Suzanne, I'm going with capacity because there's a great piece of work done by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. I thought I'd say my acronym so that you don't have to ask later. That's AHO, and they've done an inquiry, so a large piece of work about what it's going to take to grow the social and affordable housing sector sectors, because they include Indigenous housing in there, which, you know, is unusual for a lot of this research. And they define what's required, and they call it capacity, but they're not talking about whether someone's capable or has the skills or expertise particularly. They're talking much broader than that. So they're talking about the capacity of government to support. They're talking about the capacity of people like us to advocate and represent. They're talking about the resourcing capacity. And I think that's what we should be talking about. It's about the whole range of those organisations, you lot, and everything that supports the sector to grow. I'd certainly encourage you to read that report. And in fact, it's my type of report, because there's a summary which is about 24, 30 pages long and really attractively produced as well. But it gives you the ammunition you need. We have to be realistic. All of us have to be realistic. There will be, and you will anticipate it and want it because you're proud of your organisations, expectations placed on you. This evidence that was being talked about earlier, have to evidence that you are the right organisations to provide the services to your people. So that's going to be about data and information and proof and high performance. You wouldn't expect it any other way. But those expectations are negotiated with you. They're not imposed, so they're realistic, and they're what's required by your communities. And there will be support that individual organisations will require, not just to register in the national regulatory scheme, but also to be able to take advantage of some of those other opportunities. And I think whilst there are standard things all organisations need, most organisations need something tailored, and not in the short term, and no cliff edge at the end of it. Some of the capacity work I've seen is a cliff edge. You get it, and then people walk away and leave you to it, and there's no way to come back when you start doing stuff and you have those burning questions. And that's one of the things we need to tackle as the peak as well, have that ongoing support for you as well. And not least, some of you will need capital investment. Your properties will not be of the right type. They may be in appalling condition. You cannot set people up to fail. And just briefly, I realise that I'm probably going to run over my time. So the final thing I just wanted to hint on, and I say here sector relationships. I don't mean necessarily between mainstream community housing providers and you, but I mean partnerships. And I do think that in my history, I have rarely ever worked in an organisation that has been successful on its own. It's always partnered with someone, whether it's to provide support services, whether it's to develop, whether it's to manage its property. That tends to be much more likelihood of success, where we recognise the skills and capacity that we have and partner with others. Might be short term, might be medium term, maybe for the long haul, but recognising that we can't always do it alone is really important. There are a lot of things, and perhaps we can get into it in the discussion, that hamper those true partnerships at the moment. They're usually about inequality in terms of knowledge and information, access to it, inequality of opportunities that there are. There are difficulties with people being busy, aren't there? They're busy doing tenders, can't make those long-term relationships. In Sydney, I've said it, where do we go, really, at the moment? But we have to be realistic as well. I mean, sometimes I've heard people say, well, you can get the mainstream CHP, partner with an ACHP, and everything will be hunky-dory, roses in the garden. They won't be. Recognise that community housing providers, mainstream, are constrained resource-wise as well. It's not that they've got huge coffers to come in to, but there's loads of different types of alliance there. And one thing I would say, because as I say, I started off by saying I learned a lot, is this sector has a lot to give to the mainstream, in inverted commas, sector as well. And many of the providers, and I include Rebecca's organisation here, want to learn more, want to ensure that the services they provide, because they've got a high percentage of Aboriginal tenants as well, are being given culturally appropriate services and accommodation. Thank you.